Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Did I get everybody with that?
I think so.
Well, it's certainly evening here. Yeah, supper time.
The next question is from Priscilla Bettis, who asks, do we have any advice about custom scene separators in Kindle ebooks, size or format for something other than the # or asterisks? Does anybody want to get started on this?
Well, I've actually done something like this. I haven't used scene separators, but I have inserted little images at the end of the bunch of stories I published recently called Tales from the Annex. I sort of picked an image that seemed to represent the story and I put it in at the end. And what I did was I went on Pixabay, that free image site, and I picked things called either, you can search by either everything or photos or illustrations or vector graphics. And I think I picked vector graphics, which are just little black on white, tiny, or little images. And you can resize them. Once you've pulled them into into a Word document, you can resize them. And you need a transparent background though. That would be what I would look for, because if you don't have that, then your image will be there, but it'll be inside a little square that's like, it's just there. Whereas if the background's transparent, it's like there is no background and you kind of make it whatever size you want and you're good to go. So I have like a little paint can and brush and a little butterfly and a little, things like that. So that's my advice. Now, I don't know if anyone has anything better. I'm not a real tech person, but I've sort of fumbled around and made that work for me.
What's the website?
Pixabay, Pixabay.com. And they have, images that are free and you can use them. You don't need to credit anybody, and you shouldn't be accused of poaching somebody's copyrighted work.
Does anybody else use these? Because I don't. It's one of those advanced details that I haven't ever bothered with. I just use asterisks between scenes and where there's, kind of a gap in the story. Nothing at the beginning or end of chapters either. I just have never got into that.
Same here.
The last few books I've written are generally from different point of views. So I would probably head each separate bit, Frank, Jane, John, so on and so forth. Then the reader immediately knows who is, which character they're reading about at the time. But that's just happened in the last few books.
I have run into instances where I was thinking I might want to put it separated, and it turned out I didn't. I've only, published 2 books on Amazon Kindle, so I didn't have the opportunity. This was a learning experience for me, because I think if I did, I may want to go something a little more, I don't know, nicer, just like a straight line with a dot in the middle, something like that. And thank you, Audrey, for giving me that tip, because you never know, I may need one.
There's a lot of things in that site. I think if you look under ornaments or terms that are sort of used in typography for little, I think I used ornaments, and sure, you get a lot of pictures of Christmas ornaments and stuff, but you also get all these little swirlies and things. And,
I've used things like that in Word, but I haven't needed them yet with Kindle.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, there are some in Word too. I've used some of those.
Is there any issues with formatting or anything like that for the Kindle ebooks that using these things create?
I haven't noticed any. I think thinking back to Word, I think you use a insert maybe. You go to the thing on the top and you go to insert, and I think it has a little spot where you can insert an image.
Right.
And now, to tell you the truth, I'm not sure how. I think it must be living on my computer somewhere, because I've downloaded it, and then you can kind of pull it in from there. But yeah. I really should have looked up the exact process. But as I recall it isn't that difficult. And there's a little thing you can use to make the image bigger or smaller that's sort of intuitive, where you sort of pull it together and stuff. So yeah, it's not that hard. I mean, when I did my the print version of She Who Comes Forth, I actually put in little moon phases at the beginning of each chapter. I didn't do this in the ebook, just in the print book. So there's the chapter heading, and then there's the phase of the moon that happens to be what it is at the time. And I actually even made sure it really was, supposed, at least as far as the internet is concerned, the real moon phase in 1962. So cool, eh?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it was doable.
Impressed.
And I didn't have that much problem with it in Word. That wasn't one of my big Word problems when formatting was doing the images. It was other things. So I think probably you can, it's like doable.
Okay. Does anybody do the first letter of the first word of each chapter is, like 32-point font and some kind of graphical image or something, not, the regular font of the rest of the text, but you kind of fancy up the first letter of each chapter?
I'm going that first. No,
did
but if there was some style of my story that would lend to that, like if I were doing something biblical, like of course, a fictional, based on that, I may want to capture that spirit Renaissance more. But for normal use, no, I like simple.
Yeah, I've done it. I think it's called a drop cap, isn't it?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's a thing in Word somewhere, and I don't know where
Yeah,
exactly.
you can do that.
Set drop cap, and it sort of shows up, and you can adjust it.
Mm.
And I think that might actually copy over to Kindle. I don't know for a fact, but I do know that, like I said, the last time I used Kindle, it did seem to bring in a lot of Word style elements. So,
Yeah, I haven't done the drop cap in Kindle for Kindle or ebook uses, but I have done it for print. So I honestly don't know how it would translate to Kindle.
I'm wary of putting extra fiddly bits into Kindle, simply because people can change the font size as they read. And if you're not very careful, it could possibly, really look manky, to be quite honest.
good
By
point.
the time you've fiddled, and if you've got it dropped, especially, now I'm reading at the second largest print almost on there. And the older you get, the bigger the font. So yeah, I'm just keeping it really, really simple on
Yeah,
all
actually,
of my
when I
Kindle.
format my ebooks, I always go by the Smashwords Style Guide, which is this rather lumpy document that you can download for free from Smashwords. And it tells you in great detail how to format a Word document to get it to work in their system that does ebooks. But I found any document I formatted using that will work for Amazon Kindle. So, and actually it does have a little spot in there to how to insert glyphs, what they call glyphs in that document, GLYPHS, which are those little tiny images that you might want to stick in here. So you can do that. But I have a feeling that the drop caps might not be such a good idea, because he does, the guy who wrote it does say to keep everything fairly simple and to just use sort of standard fonts like Arial or Times Roman, and not try to get too fancy. Like you say, you don't want to gum it up with all kinds of stuff that'll end up looking weird. So yeah, it's probably best to keep ebooks simple and save your artistic side for print books if you feel like doing that.
Yeah. I think the thing for me is when I read, I don't pay any attention to things like that. I read to read, not to admire the graphic work of whoever put the document together. So if there are images at the beginning or ends of chapters, or the first letter is whatever, I don't even notice that. I read to read, and I realize that some readers might want things like that, but I just don't think about it like that. Think about it that way. So
I agree with you.
I
agree.
Yeah. And again, the formatting issue. The ebook formatting is incredibly easy, but part of it is because there's no special tricks in the format, in the book, in the document. So it's really easy to do that. And I've had enough problems formatting the last two paperbacks and getting them through the KDP process that the last thing I want to do is add even more complications to it. So Okay, anything else on this topic or anything related to it? Okay, we'll move to the next one, which is basically a series of questions, and I'll probably mispronounce the name, but it's from Anonymole or Anonymole, like that. And I wrote a post responding to this, and he commented on it at some point afterwards that he kind of meant some of these questions. I don't remember the word he used, but he kind of said something about they were kind of tongue in cheek or something like that. So, but you know, they're questions worth addressing. What do you think? What do we think about the idea of writing without concern for market or their demands? Anybody want to take a stab at that?
I'll start on that one.
This is a favorite topic of yours.
I mean, as I think about it, like, I don't know how you could truly write just for market demands. Like, for example, if like the market for romance was just really, really hot, which maybe it is. I don't read romance, but if there was big money to be made there, I don't think I could write a romance book, even if it was like your life depends on it. You can make a killing by writing a romance. So for me, I don't know how you would write to a genre just because that was where the money was, or that was where the popularity was. Now, if you're lucky and what you want to write happens to coincide with something that's extremely popular, then that's great. And that's a good way of hitting the jackpot. But like, and I mean, I suppose there are some people who can just say, I have no interest in this, but I can write it like no problem. Maybe there are, but personally, I can't. So I guess my feeling is you should probably write what you want to write, and just hope it coincides with what becomes popular, because you don't know what's going to be popular.
Let me change it up a little bit. One of the writers that I've talked about in these discussions, like when we talked about our favorite indie books, is Tammy Robinson. And she writes books that more often than not have an unhappy ending. So do you consider what the readers might want as you write your story? Not necessarily what your idea is, but do you think about, okay, how do I end this to make my reader happy?
Okay, can I just go back to where we started from and then come up to what you said?
Yeah.
I think for each individual writer, you've got to decide whether you want to write for money and making it your career because that's what you want to do. You want to write, or you want to write to please yourself and write what's close to your heart and feel passionate about. I fell into writing for radio and TV, and I wrote to deadlines, everything virtually from how to split the atom to how to climb a ladder for the electricity company to, you know, on Monday I was writing about potato crisps, chips, I think you call them in America, and saying they were so healthy because potatoes have all these vitamins. And you shouldn't touch meat and all that sort of thing, and fat. And on the Thursday I was writing about, for the meat board, don't eat chips, don't eat crisps, because they will actually kill you with all the fat and it's disgusting and awful and all the rest of it. So if you want to write, as in putting words together and get money for it, you can write about anything. I mean, I'm not very good at sex scenes. That's my big drawback. I'm hopeless at them because I just start giggling. But my first series, Amy in Africa, I was actually quite proud of. I put a lot of time and effort and all the rest of it. And they sort of sold, but they weren't doing that well. And then it dawned on me that the top genres at the moment were psychological thrillers. Everybody was doing psychological thrillers. So I tried my hand at that. And they've outsold Amy like you wouldn't believe. So I'm, if you like, writing to market. I wanted to go back and do another Amy book. And I thought, no, you're crazy. You've got 4 Leah books now. Do a 5th Leah book, which is what I'm doing. Now, as to endings, Mark, from what you were saying, when I got to the end of Leah 1, almost to the end, I couldn't make up my mind who the baddie was. I kept thinking, was it so-and-so? Or should I mark so-and-so? Or should I kill such and such off? And it was a bit of a cliffhanger. Boy, did I get it in the neck from readers. They came back and said, can't understand this. I'm not sure what's happened. They got really quite worried about it. So I've got round it now by, because I wrote book 2, by putting the beginning of book 2 at the end of book 1. And now people do know who did it, who's the baddie, but then I've made it more complex in book 2. So I have understood that one of the things about writing is you tie up all the ends, all the loose ends, and you give everyone a happy ending.
Which,
If that makes sense.
yeah, which I'm the kind of reader that would probably be turned off by that.
I won't force you to read it. You're all right.
No, well, at some point, it's one of the reasons why I like Tammy's book so much, is that you don't get the typical clear-cut happy ending, but I still think they are good endings, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
As she writes.
It's one of the reasons I like Law and Order that we get from the States, because it doesn't always have the good person winning. Sometimes the law gets in the way, or the court case falls apart. So you never quite know what to expect.
Yeah. Richard?
Yeah. Okay. I know I've said something similar to you also in the past, that, you know, you decide what you want to do. Is, do you want to write for love of the art, or do you want to write to make money? And I kind of step back a little bit and say, well, look, anyone who's especially starting out in their life and saying, I want to be a writer, the first thing you have to realize, unless you have an unlimited source of wealth, which some do, God bless them, but I didn't. But you have to decide what you want to do to earn a living. And that could include writing. So, you know, you could either say, I'm going to get a job doing something else and write on the side, or I'm going to get a job as a writer. But I think if you get a job as a writer, you're going to have to pay attention to what the market is asking for. And I do know of some authors, and some quite famous, who, when they did that kind of writing, they used a pseudonym. And when they did what was coming from what they really wanted to write, they used their actual name, or even vice versa, you know. So you'll have to, as a writer, I think if you want to stay in that area as your career and write novels or you know, fictional history or historical, you know, actual nonfiction, doesn't matter. You have to decide, all right, if I'm going to do this to earn money, that's a serious, you know, that's a serious question to say, and then do it. You're going to have to sometimes write things, potato chips or otherwise, that you don't really care about or like, but if you have at least a talent, as Berthold was saying, if you have that talent, go ahead and do it if you can succeed there. But that's your decision. Where are you going to make your money to live on first? Well, I was done.
Okay.
Back again.
So I forget where we left. Oh, I know. I was going to respond to what you were saying, Richard. But this idea that, you know, some writers want to ride the wave, whatever, you know, Harry Potter inspired all the books that Harry Potter inspired. And then there was the dystopian,
young adult dystopia.
Yeah. James, and what was the other one that my son read? I don't remember. But anyway, I'm the type of writer who doesn't follow. Well, I follow the wave, but I follow it about 5 or 10 years later. So the thing that I'm working on right now is what I call a domestic thriller, and it would have fit in perfectly with the Gone Girl, Girl on the Train, you know, Girl in the House Next Door, Girl Here, would have been gotten perfectly with that era. And then I have 2 or 3 takes on dystopian stories that by the time I get around to them, people will have completely forgotten. It might be the second dystopian wave. I don't know.
That's I was gonna say. You may catch on that second wave. That does happen. So,
yeah. But I mean, that's basically my thing. Is I write the story that I feel like writing at the time, and it doesn't have anything to do with what the market wants, what the readers want. But I do think about the reader and how I want to go about, particularly the ending. And sometimes I give people the ending they want, and sometimes I don't. So.
Yes, that's pretty well it. I think when most of us sort of post work or later in life writers start writing, we kind of have something we've wanted to write for years, maybe all our lives, and we just do that. Now, if it happens to attract a lot of attention and you achieve some success, then you have something to lose. Like you were saying, how you thought about writing another Amy book, but you decided to stick with the genre that's been successful because you do have a readership and you know it, and you want to, deliver books to those people that they're going to read. Whereas many of us, I'll just speak for myself, if you have nothing to lose, really, you can write pretty well what you want. So you have that freedom, but in terms of reward, you have to kind of define for yourself what reward looks like. And you're either happy with it or not. And I suppose if you want to seek out more readers, then you have to try different things and see if anything clicks and upgrade your marketing efforts and so on. But most of us who just write for the satisfaction of it don't really have to worry about that stuff. And maybe our writing benefits from that, unless we get stuck in a rut. If you just kind of do the same story that has limited appeal over and over again, well, you hit a point where you start thinking, maybe I should do something different. So, and as far as endings go, in the recent round of beta readers that read my current work in progress, one of them really did get quite upset about part of the ending. And and I at one point I thought, geez, maybe I should change this, but it was only one person out of 6, and it was evident that they were quite engaged with the story in order that, like if they hadn't been engaged with the story, they wouldn't have cared. So the fact that they cared, even though they thought the ending should have been different, was a positive sign for me. So that's pretty well all I have to say on that topic.
I think you just have to be careful that, in theory, I'm retired, joke. I'm working an awful lot of hours with silly marketing and scribbling. And the annoying part is if you have a bit of a boost and you think, wow, that's done quite well, then all of a sudden, as it happens, it slides and slides out of sight. You actually begin it's quite depressing. And you tend to get on those animals that go around on the wheel.
The hamster wheel.
Yeah, the hamster wheel. You could get on that, and it can really stuff your life up, to be quite honest. I think if anybody said, should I start writing after the age of 65? I'd say don't bother. It's unless, if you're an A personality, you feel very driven. And in some ways I should have just disappeared down the rabbit hole and, just remembered the crisps and the splitting of the atom and, climbing ladders and all that sort of thing, and look at my videos and think, well, they're pretty good. Well, pretty nice to watch and great fun to do. But I've now got myself into a terrible mess. So it's a two-edged sword.
Yeah. Okay. Second part of this series of questions was, how much should writers do to develop a niche? And I think it's kind of the same answer, which is basically, it depends on what you want to do. Do you want to be seen as the writer of, genre X, or do you want to explore different kinds of stories and books? And I've said enough on here frequently that what motivates me to write is to continue trying to come up with new stories, different ways to tell stories. So sticking to a niche would not work for me.
Yeah, whether it's a niche or a rut, that's the question.
Yeah,
that's why I'm wrapping up my current sort of approach to to fiction, and that'll be the last book in that area, and then I'm going to try something else. I don't know what yet exactly, although I have some vague ideas. But yeah, you kind of find yourself telling the same story over and over again. But, you know, let's face it, romance, which is incredibly successful, is the same story over and over again. And yet people have managed to put enough new stuff into it that it's still popular. So, or maybe some readers actually, you know, even though they know there's going to be a happy ending, and it's just a matter of how these particular characters get there, that keeps them buying more and more books. So, and the formula works. So I really don't know. Maybe a niche is a good thing, but I don't think it would work for me.
I mean, I applaud writers who do that and can do it successfully and do it well, and that's what they're comfortable with. I don't have any issue with that. I mean, I think most of the most successful writers basically found a niche, found a genre that they can write in and develop a readership and a fan base, and they stick in that, and they do incredibly. Great for them. It's just not what I can do or how I write. It's not what motivates me to write. So,
have you all heard the story about, well, you mentioned her earlier, Richard, J.K. Rowling, right? And we all know her Harry Potter series. And then a book came out by Robert Galbraith, also traditionally published, and it was slated in all the newspapers. What's a load of rubbish, same old, you know, PI with a false leg, etc., etc. And then it was leaked that it was actually written by J.K. Rowling. And wow, sudden success overnight. TV series, the lot, you know. So
I remember that, yeah.
Yeah, and they all say you've got to build a brand, which is one of the awful things about marketing, because I don't feel you can do much marketing that isn't you. I think you've got to, project yourself. So apparently, so I've been told, that readers will read what you wrote because they like your brand. So you could change genres if they happen to like you, even, without changing your name. As long as you're happy with what you're writing and you're passionate about your story and all the rest of it. So,
I mean, I'm gonna say that, let's see, I've written a book that's military science fiction. I've written a book that's sort of more regular near future science fiction. I've written a book that's like gothic horror. And I've written a book that is sort of horror mixed with romance, mixed with comedy. So, and it's just each time it's like, well, this is what I felt like writing. So I don't know if that's a niche or not, or if it's an anti-niche, but
Well, I've published three memoirs and 2 backstories. 5 memoirs. Okay, but 2. No, sorry, tell a lie. 3 memoirs with backstory, 5 adventure thrillers set in Africa with 2 backstories, a humor, and psychological thrillers. So I have jumped around. How much I'm getting a bit of cross reading, but not as much as I would have expected, or not, as much as I hoped.
I would say for myself, looking back on everything I've written, not necessarily published, easily 85 to 90% of it is humorous. I've done essays, short stories, and a couple of little short essays I've posted online. It's where I'm most comfortable, but at the same time, that allows me freedom to just jump in any genre. I mean, the first one I did is basically fantasy. The second one was mythology, which is fantasy too, but it was really hewing close to the original myth. And I have in the back of my mind a pseudo horror story I mentioned, I think, on a forum cast, and also a science fiction, but I think that one might not be humorous. I'm going back and forth in it because I hit on an interesting idea. But yeah, so it's going to be humor, but I think that gives me a lot of flexibility. I can sort of dip into any genre I want after that. So.
We have about 5 minutes left, by the way.
Do we want to start or take on the next question? What about the real world versus improbable or impossible worlds?
I feel like I would have a lot to say on that probably couldn't be covered in 5 minutes, but
Yeah, I think that might be a longer than 5 minutes kind of a topic. So is there anything else anybody wants to add or on any
Oh,
that covered
I
so far?
did squeeze this in last time. I said rush, but I do want to say it to anyone who actually watches this. Please feel free to send in questions. And when we tweet these out, I got to remember to put some hashtags on. So, see, just because I think that this is, I think, a lot of fun answering these questions. And for the people who did send in questions we have not gotten to, we're going to get to them. There is no doubt. So yeah, that's and thanking those people who did, because again, it feeds us, and then hopefully we can give you some ideas based on our opinions, and they are just opinions. So
Exactly.
no rules. We are not a rules group.
We do not do rules, but yes, we appreciate all these questions.
These video chats were titled "The Rules of Writing That You Must Follow."
Just a little side thing on that, and if we have time for it, I saw another thing about don't use prologues. I haven't used a prologue, but don't use prologues. And I said to my response, that was, I have yet to have someone come up to me and say, don't read that book. It starts with a prologue. Okay. So, grain of salt with everything you hear.
But J.R.R. Tolkien, he wrote this book with a prologue, The Lord of the Rings, and it has a prologue.
Yeah.
You can't possibly do it.
Kind of did that. But that's what I'm saying. I don't use them yet. And if you feel like they're not good to use, don't use them. But I don't think that's going to make or break your book in any way.
Exactly. Like a lot of these rules, I think, come from people who read a lot of submissions. And they notice certain things that start to bug them. And one of them is probably prologues or certain ways of describing things, or people rolling their eyes or whatever. And they see that again and again and again, and they get fed up. And so then they get on their blog and they say, writers, don't be so stupid. Don't use a prologue because it bothers me.
Which brings us all the way back to our first question. So if you are, point to everyone, if you're writing for the money, don't use prologues. So you can get accepted for your submissions, because that's what they're looking for. But if you're not, do what works for your story.
Then you delve a bit deeper and you think, I wonder what this person has written. So you go onto Amazon and you find that they've written half a dozen how-to books, generally about losing weight or being healthy or having a peaceful mind. And you're thinking, you write basically almost, who are you to tell me whether I should or shouldn't have a prologue?
Exactly.
Or use an adverb.
It does seem like on Twitter, the whole prologue issue comes up at least once a week, if not more. And I don't get it. I really don't get it. And I don't get people who think they are anybody who's in a position to say, don't do X. I just don't get that. I don't get it. So anyway, okay, as Richard said, thank you to everybody who's asked questions. Thank you to each of you for participating again. We'll hopefully do this in a few weeks' time and get to the rest of the questions, and feel free to provide us with new questions, either via comment or email or responding to our tweets about this. We appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.